Well, ladies and gentlemen, while you're continuing to enjoy lunch, we're going to get a few housekeeping items out of the way, and then we'll introduce our moderator to start today's forum. Again, we're honored to have Tri-County Council of the Lower Eastern Shore as our presenting sponsor. I also want to thank our table sponsors today: Worcester County Government, Chesapeake Utilities, Salisbury University, University of Maryland Eastern Shore. How about a round of applause for all of our sponsors? I want to thank our media sponsor, WMDT 47, and our friends at PAC 14 for being here as well. I want to draw your attention to the screens here in the banquet room and the sponsor banner as you enter today's luncheon, and thank the Chamber's numerous patron sponsors that generously support the Chamber of Commerce. The patron program is our key component that allows the Salisbury Area Chamber to produce quality educational and advocacy programs on behalf of our members and the regional business community. I want to especially recognize our diamond level patron sponsors: Pohanka Automotive Group, Beacon at Salisbury University, the Salisbury Independent, the Voice Radio Network, D3, WMDT 47, the Ross in downtown Salisbury, Morning Star Productions, and Purdue Farms. How about a round of applause for our patron sponsors? We have several, other than our legislators, special guests with us today. I'd like to recognize them. Joining us, our County Executive for Wicomico County, Julie Giordano. Julie, I know you're here. President of the Wicomico County Council, John Cannon. John, thank you. The Chair of Wicomico County Board of Education, Jean Malone. Jean, thank you. Wicomico Board of Education member, Bonnie Ennis. I know Bonnie's with us. Welcome. Executive Director of the Tri-County Council, Greg Padgett. Greg, again, welcome. Thank you. Great Superintendent of Wicomico County Public Schools, Dr. Micah Stauffer. Micah, thank you. The Economic Development Director for Wicomico County, Dave Ryan. Welcome, Dave. The guy that wants to be like Dave from Somerset County, Danny Thompson. And the woman that doesn't care about either one of them, Melanie Purcell, Worcester County Tourism and Economic Development. The Wicomico County Administrator, Monkey Luffman. Monkey, thank you. I know our Worcester County Administrator, Weston Young, was supposed to be with us, so let him know I did recognize him. The great president of Warwick Community College, Dr. Deb Casey. Go Fins. Flight Director for NASA Wallops Island, Dave Pierce. Dave, thank you for being here. Our great Director of Parks, Rec, and Tourism here in Wicomico County, Steve Miller. I know Steve's with us. Thank you, Steve. And Wicomico County's president of our local NAACP chapter, Monica Brooks. I didn't see Monica, but that doesn't mean she's not here. She's supposed to be here. Well, look, before I introduce Zach, there were some good things that came out of the session. The governor, in his great role as our leader of the state, did fully match the UMES commitment, which previous administrations hadn't done. We got some money for the airport, which is expanding, as you all know. I guess you heard that the new airline should be starting service this fall, is what we're hearing. The EV pushback happened. So the mandates, the crazy mandates on EV cars that nobody buys, I'm not offending any of you who have an EV, that's been pushed back, and I think we'll probably see that discussed even more in coming sessions. Family medical leave program, which was supposed to begin, is getting pushed back to 18 months. And frankly, I think that's the beginning of some further pushing back on that program, since the Department of Labor doesn't even have the staff to administer the program as is. And we'll hear other good things, I know, that happened in session from our legislators. At this time, I want to call up our moderator, Zach Evans. Zach is the chair of the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. He's also past chair of our Government and Business Affairs Committee. Zach, please join me.
Good afternoon. All right. So there was a roar early on when we were starting the announcements, and I was worried that the audio wasn't going to be sufficient. But luckily enough, with me behind the microphone, I'll ensure that everybody hears me. But no one came here today to hear me, and so I'd like to call our legislators up. And once they make their way up here, I'll take the time to introduce them. So if you could please start making your way here to the front of the room. We do have name tags for you. Please go ahead and grab your respective seat. In the meantime, I'm just going to make a couple of announcements. Coming up on Wednesday, May 7th, the Chamber is going to host our annual State of the Wacomico County Schools Luncheon right here at the Civic Center. That's an 11:30 kickoff. On May 22nd, we're going to have our first inaugural Fire Chiefs of Delmarva Forum and Luncheon, and that's going to be at the Cambria Hotel in Ocean City, Maryland, and that's 11:30 kickoff as well. June 5th will be the annual Delmarva Eats Taste of the Town at Dove Point, featuring over a dozen area restaurants. Please come with your appetite. That's a wonderful event. And then June 11th at 8 a.m. at the Wacomico Civic Center right here, we have our second annual Law Enforcement Leaders of Delmarva Forum. So that's a breakfast event. We really encourage you to come out and spend some time with us that morning. Tickets for all of these events can be reserved on the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce website. So without further ado, I'd like to run through the introductions, and I'm going to start with our senator, who's seated closest right here to me. So immediately to my left, we have our senator representing District 38, Mary Beth Carrozza. Let's give her a round of applause. We've got Delegate Barry Beecham representing District 38B, our newest delegate. Let's give him a round of applause. Delegate Chris Adams with 37B as well. Delegate Tom Hutchinson from 37B. Delegate Charles Otto from 38A. And Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes from 37A. So really quickly, I just want to go over the format. I see a lot of familiar faces here in the audience. I want to remind the audience that there is an audience participation opportunity. There are some white note cards along with pens positioned around the center of your table. We have a long list of questions that have been prepared from our Government and Business Affairs and Legislative Committee. However, we want to make sure that we can hit any relevant topics that may come up in conversation amongst audience members. So if you have a question, write it on that card, wave that card up, and one of the chamber staff members is going to come grab that card and bring it to the front of the room to me. A reminder for all of our panelists, we're not going to have time for opening statements, but we will build in some time for all of you to share your experience this year in Annapolis. We're going to have 90 seconds to address each answer. That's a hard 90 seconds, thanks to our timekeeper right here in the front, Miss Carrie Todd. Let's give Carrie a big round of applause. She's going to ensure we get everybody out of here on time. So I'm going to jump right into the first question, if that's okay.
Start with Chris Adams from finance.
Well, I'm gonna go with some of the more we're gonna go with some of the more general questions, and we're gonna talk about the General Assembly. It was a busy session. You heard Bill talk about some of the historic things that we had to overcome in Annapolis. Let's go ahead and jump right into the elephant in the room. The budget was a real topic of discussion. And so the General Assembly just passed record-breaking new taxes and fees, which will impact Marylanders in some fashion. Specifically, what cuts in the budget should have been made to help avoid these taxes? And I can start with Delegate Adams, but I'll start with you, Senator. Let's go ahead and jump into that, and we've got 90 seconds.
Okay. Good afternoon. It is great to be home, and I first want to thank the Chamber and thank all of you who came up during session to stay involved. The bottom line is it was a very difficult session. We had an energy crisis and a budget crisis. When we talk about the budget, we ended up passing a $67 billion budget with $1.8 billion in tax increases, the largest tax increases in Maryland's history. We, as an Eastern Shore delegation, oppose the budget and the tax increases, but I think it's important that we be for something, so we did propose an alternative budget. And in those, in order to address the alternative budget, we had cuts that would have addressed it by looking at a 5% across the board spending reductions in state agencies, that we think that would be fair across the board. We would look at a state employee hiring freeze, again, not for critical public safety positions, but look at that, again, trying just to do our part before we would increase taxes. We would have a pause for the planned cost of living salary increases. And then we also looked at a proposal with Medicaid eligibility to just look at it right now. You're eligible if you make $100,000 or more, you're eligible for Medicaid, make an adjustment there. And then I wanted to talk a little bit, I can talk about my proposal, which was included in their alternative budget, which was a pause for the blueprint spending and implementation. I'll talk more about that. Again, that came from our local superintendents as well.
Thank you, Senator. And Delegate Adams, I know I had kind of teed that one up for you as well. So if you wanted to maybe share some of your thoughts on what opportunities existed that maybe didn't make their way into the budget.
Right, so the budget is this microphone on? Yeah. So the budget was the number one issue going into session this year. When I was with you last December, I said this is likely the first budget that I'm going to vote against in 11 years. As a business owner, I understand instinctively the nature of budgeting, that you've got to budget during good times and during very bad times. So voting against a budget is almost against the principles that I have as a business owner. The reason why I didn't vote for the budget is that we had to do the budget with a tax increase, the largest tax increase in Maryland's history. But it wasn't just that. It was the fact that the tax increases set in motion future tax increases to the lens of $5 to $7 billion, because that's what Department of Legislative Services is telling us is what's coming if we don't resolve Medicaid spending and education spending. So this service tax that you're hearing about that just related to tech, all that is getting the comptroller set up, get the mechanism in place, so they can then go back to, okay, here are the electricians, the plumbers, every service that we provide in the state of Maryland. That's how they're going to get to $6 to $7 billion increase every year. And I'm worried because we see a freight train coming, not this year, but in years forward. It's literally, if we don't solve our spending problems now, we will have to certainly deal with them with austerity and the years moving forward. That was our position as Republicans, is that you've got to solve the spending problem now and not later. We didn't do that, which I believe by definition means that we've got some rough times ahead, more difficult than you saw this legislative session.
Thank you. Delegate Beecham, this was your first year in Annapolis, and walking into the halls there in Annapolis and having to overcome one of the biggest challenges we've ever had in General Assembly. I'm sure it wasn't a great way to be introduced, but as a business owner, sometimes diving in head first, I'm sure through your experience, is a great way to learn. So what are your thoughts just in watching some of that work that was done on the budget? Where do you think opportunities exist? Because much like Delegate Adams, you have to balance a budget every year as well.
Well, being on appropriations, every vote that we took, and when I say we, it was pretty much down a partisan line. We couldn't win a vote. There were 8 Republicans and out of 20 some, and so every vote we basically lost. I proposed taking 5%, just exactly what Senator Carrozza said. Take 5% across the board, a $67 billion budget. You could balance the budget, and not one entity would be harmed. They basically shot that down. The budget, House Bill 350 was, the first time they say that it was strictly a partisan vote. Not one Republican voted for the budget, which I understand was history making. I don't know that because I've only been in for one session, but that's what I've been told. But I think that there were many improvements many cuts that could have been done to balance the budget. Basically the red line, purple line in Baltimore, 7% of the population rides that. But if you look at the amount of money that goes into that, that would have been one of my recommendations to cut. The second one would have been to delay the blueprint, or actually just slow the blueprint down. Yeah, and we had, I think, 16 amendments to the budget, and basically they all got rejected, so, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I know I don't want to belabor the budget talks because I know it was what a lot of time was spent on this session. Is there anyone, before I jump into some other line of questioning, and we'll revisit some of the budget talks later, was there anyone else that wanted to share a response?
Just to highlight just a couple of things my colleagues already mentioned, and I'll start off with this. I am a huge education fan, and I have been and always will be. But I always want to keep the reality in the forefront. In the forefront of the fact that we are struggling to pay for the $3 billion annual blueprint price tag. That's the reality of it. It's just like being in your own home. If you don't have the money to do it, you got to navigate and shift some things a little. And I do recall that when we spoke with the Wycomico Board of Education prior to going into session, and it was actually a question that I raised about the pre-K, the efforts to move in that direction. Are we prepared to do that? Is that something that we can pause? Can we look at doing this differently? Maybe we'll be able to continue to support our nonprofits of the world, Shore Up Incorporated, to be able to let them do their thing, and we have, at some point when we can afford it, the infrastructure to bring all that into the school system. So that's one area I think that really needed some attention to really pull back on. And then the other thing I'll highlight is on the House floor, we had a bill, and the chair of appropriations wasn't even really familiar with it. He stated that $14 million for rental assistance. Sounds great in theory, but it had not even been reviewed since 9 years ago. We're in a different climate now. We need to go back and review this $14 million and see if there's something that we need to really have at that level, or see if we even need it, because it may be done through a different mechanism at this point. So review of what we currently have is important to me, and not just rubber stamping a budget.
And Delegate, it's evident that you're passionate when you speak about those issues and just some of the dialogue that occurred amongst members of the General Assembly. So I want to just kind of volley this one back to you. You know, this session, during the floor and House debates for the BRFA, you passionately advocated for your constituents here on Delmarva. And I think that passion is evident here. So if you could just share as a reminder for folks, you know, you are an elected official. You represent what's in the best interest of your constituents. And so although you were passionately advocating for the people that you represent, it was met with a lot of mixed reactions from party affiliates of yours. And so how do you work on that balance? How do you maintain your focus? If you could just share a little bit, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but I think you deserve recognition for what you stood up for there.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. To answer your question, how do I maintain the focus? The focus is easy, and I'm going to say this because I know it is. I've been here and as an elected official almost 20 years, and the focus is the people. And that's the only reason why I got into the first place. You know we don't make a lot of money. So no, it has not changed for me. When I got elected in 2006 to represent Wycomico County District 1 and understood the needs of the people, to understand they need a roof over their head, they need food, they need medical, those things, those core things, those values haven't changed for me. And so when we came to the the operating budget, and we looked at the BRFA and some things were put back and things are not there, I still constantly saw that the message was the same for the Eastern Shore. It was minimal. Constantly fighting for things that we depend on. Our farmland, natural gas. We are constantly fighting for those things, and to not see those in the budget. Our open space funding. Those things are important. Our Rural Prosperity Fund. And if you take time to research about the Rural Prosperity Fund, it touches our transportation, our way of life. It touches our schooling for our young people, for them to be able to do summer programs in technology. These are the things that the entire Eastern Shore is benefiting from. And when you cut those things in comparison to other counties in the state of Maryland, it is detriment to our way of life. And the last thing I'll say is that when we have people fighting against us trying to make sure that Somerset County has ambulance service and making sure that they can secure that, what kind of state of mind are we working with people? And so I know it's your district, Otto, but I just have an attitude about some of those things.
Thank you.
You've been important.
And Delegate Otto, I know I know that is your district, and I also know that you're a huge advocate for our agricultural and our rural communities there in Annapolis. One of the only farmers, right, that's still there in Annapolis to represent the best interests of the people, the men and women who grow our food. So I wanted to ask you, just really quick, we hear a lot in, and this is maybe more of a federal question, Delegate, but I think at the state level and at the local level is where we really resolve these issues. So we hear a lot about the impact of some of the federal tariffs and some of the trade negotiations that are going on. How are those going to impact farmers in your own backyard and the farmers that you represent? What do you think that's going to do for our ag community as we come into a planting session, a planting season that already doesn't see strong prices and sees increased costs of inputs?
Well, thank goodness we're a deficit area for grain production. We bring more in than we grow, but that's still, it's an international market, and that has impacts. And also it has impacts on the inputs that we have coming into the Port of Baltimore. And I'd say the Key Bridge has had more impact on our agricultural supplies than anything. And I hope that we can get that rebuilt in a responsible manner and not worry about bike paths and pedestrian paths and make it for trucks and cars.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I will say that Key Bridge corridor is integral to supporting agriculture here on the Delmarva Peninsula as well. People don't always make that connection. So thank you for doing that, Delegate. We've not had the chance yet to hear from Delegate Hutchinson. And so I have two questions, so I'm going to give you time to answer both of them accordingly. But first question I wanted to ask you is, you had supported House Bill 819, which would have established a 5% price preference in bids for companies with ESOP plans. And I think there was just some misunderstanding of what the intent was there. And if you could share sort of your school of thought for supporting that and why you think that was a good thing for the businesses here in Delmarva.
Sure. So I serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee, so that went through the government ops component of it, ESOP, Employee Stock Option Program, and really we saw that as an opportunity to support small businesses, employee-owned businesses, and try to get them some incentives to earn some state contracts.
And through your work with the Health and Governmental Operations Committee, there were also some specific things that you were able to work on that did have a direct impact to your constituents on the Eastern Shore.
So I'm the only member of the House of Delegates that represents Eastern Shore on the Health and Government Operations, and I take that very seriously. And I look at every bill with the framework of saying, is this a bill that's going to improve quality of care, improve workforce shortage, access, ED wait times? And so most bills that go through Health and Government Operations aren't necessarily partisan bills. So if I keep that mindset, what we can do. And so one bill I passed was to help advanced practice nurses get reciprocity of other states in the area. There's such a slow process for anybody to get licensed here in the state of Maryland. Our health occupation boards are not adequate in the way that they support that. So we've been working on a lot of legislation to improve all that licensing. We need to get more workforce here, and so there are a number of bills that I either sponsored directly or co-sponsored to help expedite that, whether it's dental hygienists, whether it's pharmacists here on the shore. But probably one of the most important ones we did that I was happy to co-sponsor was, and it was sponsored by the chair of the committee, was to permanently allow telehealth to be a component of delivering health care. And I think that's very important for us here on the shore, and will also ensure that both Medicaid and commercial insurers will get reimbursed at the full rate, whether it's telehealth or in-person services.
Thank you. And time and convenience are one of the biggest inhibitors to access to healthcare. And so, just that in itself makes it more accessible for people to get the help they need and really take the best care of themselves. I'd like to maybe jump into a question that everybody could weigh in on, and so this isn't directed at anyone specifically, but we do have representation from NASA here, and I remember hearing at our Southern Delmarva Economic Forecast over the winter, that the director of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center had told the audience there that day that aerospace and the investment that we have in our NASA state-based facilities and our regional facilities should really be a prime focus for economic development in Maryland. We have the infrastructure here partially in the state already or in close proximity there at Wallops. So what did the General Assembly do to maybe help further incentivize growth in that segment? Is there anything specific? Yes, sir. Go back to Delegate Hutchinson.
I'll actually like to talk about all the things we didn't do, which is very unfortunate. Because I remember that call that we had with the aerospace community, and they were all calling from the state of Colorado. And quickly I look up at what is the corporate income tax rate in the state of Colorado, and it was about 4%. This year the governor came out and said that he is pro-growth, pro-business, and proposed to lower our corporate income tax rate from 8.25 to 7.99%. That went nowhere. Once again, lowering our corporate income tax has fallen, and we continue to admit that we are so dependent on the federal government here in the state of Maryland, yet we are not serious, whether it's aerospace or any commercial business to come here to the state of Maryland. We do not focus on that, and it's very unfortunate that continues to be the mantra out of Annapolis.
So real quickly, I met with Rocket Lab in Annapolis on a Thursday, and we invited both Rocket Lab and NASA to speak before the Eastern Shore delegation in this legislative session. And it's important just to share a few messages that I think matter. First and foremost is that the Eastern Shore depends so much on economic development, and it comes from fewer and fewer places. So since we have, thank you. Since we have Wallops Island in our backyard, I understood 11 years ago that. So for 11 years, we've known that Wallops Island is so important to us. I'm a member of the Greater Salisbury Committee, so it's sort of built into my DNA as I got involved in politics to know why it's so important. But to the point with Rocket Lab, let me just share the message that they were sharing with us, is that they are in Maryland and that they are growing because they see Maryland as a technology center close to universities and institutions where research happens, and that we can take advantage of that on the Eastern Shore, Salisbury University, UMES, right in our backyard. So we have the ability to deliver resources and technology training for Wallops Island. The most important part is that when we train people locally, they stay locally. And this helps Wallops Island because they need people who love rural parts of our state and our nation. That is one of the biggest appeals to us on the Eastern Shore, and Wallops Island benefits from that. The other message I would send, which is sort of a negative, is we passed this tech tax, and we really don't know what the net impact of that tech tax is. But when I think Wallops Island, I think technology, I think about computer software, and I do know that there are certain government contractors that are making choices to leave our state. It was one of the top news issues during session this year. One of our colleagues moved his contracting business out of state because of it. And I would say that the governor really needs to think seriously about what these tax policies are doing globally for the state of Maryland, and especially as it relates to manufacturing and technology jobs that literally we are trying to partner with Virginia and Wallops Island on with the national promotion. Yeah.
And Senator, I know you had some comments, and Delegate, we're going to work that microphone back down to you.
Okay. The Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce, you just had a Wallops Industry Day to foster the aerospace ecosystem. I think what we need to do locally is where we're going to succeed and not depend, as you heard, some of the state policies are not going in the direction we would want for the aerospace industry, but what we are doing locally, we need to strengthen that. I mean, we look at University of Maryland Eastern Shore with our aviation program there and our other institutions of higher education, Salisbury University and Warwick. We look at also, when we talk about the ecosystem, we look about the partnership on the workforce housing. Yesterday, I was in Pocomoke, and we were recognizing Davis Strategic Development for going forward with workforce housing in Pocomoke. They redid the old Pocomoke Firehouse, and we have and they are now filled with personnel from NASA Wallops that live there. So I believe when we talk about aerospace, I'd like to continue to build on what the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce is doing with NASA Wallops and build out these other partnerships.
Thank you. And Delegate Sample Hughes?
Sure. So real briefly, I would just say that, last year we had piece of legislation that required a commission to convene, is entitled the Maryland Aerospace and Technology Commission. And with that commission being in place, we need to also make sure we hold the commission accountable, because they have various charges that they're responsible for, such as designating aerospace technology zones, making sure there's partnerships with our education institutions as well as businesses, and looking at where we can offer potential, and what we have done probably about in 2016, additional tax credits for businesses that are in that space. So while we did not do anything in particular this year, I think that it's necessary for us to still go back and say, hey, Commission, you've convened. Your report is due to the General Assembly and the Governor every October the 1st. What are you doing? What have you done? And where are we as a state? So I would just hold the Commission's feet to the fire, because it is state law, and we can at least build upon that and get some momentum.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm looking at David Pierce, because I think we did get a study passed, right? And so I think at the state level, we're going to continue to investigate what type of opportunity exists in aerospace, but we know that there's rich opportunity that exists within that industry, and it could really be something to be proud of here on the Eastern Shore. So,
Yes, and we had a good highlight this week of a groundbreaking for the causeway at Wallops. And that was both Maryland and Virginia, and I think Delaware as well, congressional delegations all were in full support of that. So we're together on things, and it is an important part of our economy. Unfortunately, Wallops is a redhead stepchild of Goddard, but in Prince George's County, but they get a lot of support from the state of Maryland.
yeah, we just need to make sure we're getting equal support down here for the opportunities that exist on the Eastern Shore. I'd like to ask a question for our newest member of the Eastern Shore delegation, if that's okay, Delegate Beecham. And so, you know, as a business owner, I'm going to ask you a question that I think you can relate to in a number of capacities. So, you know, businesses and job creators are considering whether to remain in Maryland. And Delegate Adams shared that there were some members of the General Assembly who had made a decision to relocate their business. And so in your view, does the General Assembly look like they're going to wait to see a mass exodus of businesses before they realize, as we did with the O'Malley millionaires tax repeal several years ago, that they need to return the state's original income tax tables? What do you think is going to be the catalyst that really gets this conversation moving?
Well, I think that perhaps we should contact the delegate that moved his IT business to Virginia, because that pretty much sums up, you know, what's really happening in Maryland. You know, when you have someone that is, you know, sitting in our capacity and he's saying, I'm moving my business because of this 3% tax, then that should pretty much answer this question. You know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, if you look at the state of Utah, they have the #1 economy in the country, and they've had it for 17 years. And the reason is because they lowered the corporate tax rate to 4%. Now, it's going to be interesting to see, because North Carolina just lowered theirs to 2%. So, you know, I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking, you know, a rising tide raises all ships. And I'm thinking that, you know, if you lower the corporate tax rate, then you stimulate the revenue. And if you stimulate the revenue stream, taxes, everything rides on that. So that would be what I would say. Take a look at the corporate tax.
Well, and I appreciate that you referenced North Carolina. You know, I get the opportunity to travel to North Carolina a lot for work, and I find that my accent is not that unique in North Carolina. And what I mean by that is North Carolina is a prime example of a state who now has more registered voters that are non-born native North Carolinians than they have otherwise. And so the majority of voters in the state of North Carolina are not from the state of North Carolina, and I think it has a lot to do with their favorable business environment and their favorable tax environment.
I'd like to dovetail that. Pepsi-Cola Bottling Company, it's been here 103 years, and basically MDE has closed them down, and it's not user-friendly. Why would you have a company that's been here for 103 years and you allow them to be pushed out because of an environmental issue. And it was such a minute environmental issue, but they find them every day until they finally had enough. They said, well, and they were already manufacturing probably 60% of the Pepsi in North Carolina anyway. They said, well, instead of manufacturing 60% or producing it, we'll just do 100% and then just ship it up. So you're already seeing that shift. So that pretty much tells me that North Carolina is probably going to explode here in the next few years.
Well, I don't often panel source our next question, but because we're having such a positive conversation, do we want to cover the unemployment insurance trust fund or energy first? Any takers?
Go for the energy.
You want to jump in? We'll jump into energy, and so I have a specific energy question that I'm going to direct to Delegate Adams, and then I'm going to ask a broader energy question to the entire group. So, Delegate Adams, you participate on the House Economic Matters Committee, and so House Bill 1036, the Renewable Energy Certainty Act, sets standards for solar siting in Maryland. There was a lot of amendments rejected. As a stakeholder from the agricultural community, we are very concerned about the run on agricultural land here on Delmarva. We know that we need it to support our largest industry. We didn't get the concession that we were looking for in the drafted bill language and what was ultimately passed. So could you just share with the members of the audience some of the nuance to that bill, some of the concerns regarding the intent of that bill, and what your position is?
All right, so 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Go. So we have in that bill, and I think I'm the chair of the Eastern Shore delegation and speaking for all of us, a bill that is offensive to the rural parts of our state of Maryland. The bill was passed thinking that we would put solar in Montgomery County, and therefore they went after prime agricultural land as sort of this weird, nuanced approach to finding agricultural land, but also make it apply to Montgomery County. What we passed in reality was a bill, and you need to hear the acreage. You need to hear the numbers per county. Between 6,000 and 8,000 acres of land will be available for solar without any local input or holding it back or stopping it through planning and zoning. Our county councils, our municipal leaders who should be able to have local decisions made locally are going to be found they have no control over this. And let me just say, as a business owner, again, I believe in local use of land. A private property owner should be able to use their land for what they want within the context of planning and zoning, within the context of comprehensive planning, where areas of our state and our region can make these local decisions, because that's where the rubber meets the road. When there's citizen opposition, when there's frustration, this is where counties and planning and zonings, this is where they live. And so what's going to end up happening is, in the infinite wisdom of Annapolis, is we've decided we can make that decision better from the state than we can locally. And what I've said in the committee is that we are literally making the Eastern Shore bear the burden of renewable energy for the entire state. And at the end of the day, it gets rid of no baseload energy. We still have to have nuclear, we still have to have coal, and we have to have all forms of baseload, affordable energy, but yet we're going to pass bills like this that offend the citizens of our state. The Eastern Shore delegation is likely to write a letter to the governor very soon to ask him to veto this piece of legislation. Take it back to the drawing board. It's not going to move that fast anyhow. Somewhere, a leader in our state, like the governor, needs to be able to step back and say, it is for the best of our state that we not offend the rural parts of our state, like the Eastern Shore, as we're advancing these sort of goals. What an offensive act to pass that piece of legislation this year, the way that we did, with no input from agriculture that would have been constructive, not destructive to the effort.
Yeah, and just on behalf of the agricultural community, what wound up passing was approval of up to 5% of priority preservation acreage, and 2% would be 54,000 acres on Delmarva. 5% is well over 100,000 acres.
148,000
acres. The goal for this project is less than 30,000 acres, correctly? So, the disproportionate impact that it could have on agriculture in these rural communities here on the Eastern Shore is very real, because the cost per acre of land that is zoned agricultural is still the most affordable piece of land that you can buy here in the state, and it's on the Eastern Shore. So thanks for kind of diving into that. There's a lot of nuance. But all energy costs are going to continue to be a hot topic, right? We're not going to avoid that over the coming sessions and over the coming years. So does the Maryland Energy Efficiency Act of 2008, the Empower Maryland Act, does that need to be abandoned, revisited, restructured? I'm teeing that up for anyone who would like to. We're all simultaneously nodding yes, so I think a consensus is good.
Well, yes, it should be. It's forcing the ratepayers to subsidize turning their appliances and things to electricity. And electricity's never been efficient. It's been convenient because you can make it out of coal. And other energies, or nuclear really, is what we need to be going to. And also, on the other hand, the building efficiency performance standards should have been thrown out the window too. Any building over 38,000 square feet is going to have to be electrified. Except for hospitals. We did get an exception in there for them.
Yeah. And I know.
And the EVs, that mandate should have been thrown out. It was delayed 2 years.
And I know with all of this run on energy, right, what we really need to talk about is go ahead. I'm sorry, Delegate.
Even with the same space of energy, you know, this session, or during the session, I had a town hall. It was virtual. And I immediately needed to hone in on what's going on with these, the bills. I mean, people are hurting. And with that being said, I felt as though we as the General Assembly could have done more. It wasn't until probably the last, 2 days of session, we had a bill that came through and say, oh, this is gonna help, this is gonna help. Well, that bill was House Bill 1035, and it's entitled Next Generation Energy Act. Well, I thought I was gonna get some relief for citizens for that, but the bill is a huge bill. But anyway, to bring it down a little bit, the relief that you'll get as a ratepayer equates to only about maybe $100 for the entire year. You're looking at something in summertime, and you're looking at a rebate in the wintertime. Well, as you're aware, the cost right now is 2, 3, 4 times more than what you're currently paying. And there's another rate increase that's gonna happen in June. So the frustration is real, because the reality of it is I feel as though we could do more. When we talk about the Empower program, that's something that we impose as a state, and we should be able to do something about it and be able to help citizens overall. And we walked away from that meeting, that virtual meeting, and I felt as though I'm still puzzled because I really didn't get direct answers. And so that's unfortunate, but please know that we're trying. We're trying to do something, but that's the extent of it.
Thank you. And I know a few more of our delegates had Delegate Adams and then Delegate Beecham. And then I have another energy-related question.
I'll be very brief. The most phone calls and emails that I got, I'm wondering if the rest of you got, that were energy related, because that was the number one. I mean, the first week that I was up there, I was getting overwhelmed, and it was like everybody was concerned about their energy bill. And I didn't even know about Empower. You know, I'm new to this. I don't even pay electric bills. But I'll tell you, there was a large difference between Chop Tanks and Delmarva Power. And when I say a large difference, you know, I mean, you know, we actually dug into it, and but you know, the Empower Chop Tank it's not incorporated in because they're a co-op. I will tell you this: the average customer paid $40 to $50 per month more because of the Empower, and that certainly would help people that are on a fixed income. I look at people that it really has an effect on, and that if you took that off of their electric bill, it certainly would help them close that gap.
Right. I'll be very quick. I serve on Economic Matters Committee and on Subcommittee for Public Utilities, so I understand the issue, which is pretty simple. It was if budget's number one problem, energy's number two, and it's a supply-demand problem. It's a supply and demand curve. We need more generation to keep our prices low. What Maryland does is we import so much of our energy, better than 40%, gets imported into the state. And so 1035, the bill that Cherie was talking about, was aimed at increasing generation so we could, in the long run, lower prices for the citizens. That was supposed to help expand nuclear at Calvert Cliffs. It was supposed to allow for retrofit of some of the projects in Maryland to natural gas, and again, in the infinite wisdom of Annapolis, they turned that bill into something completely different. which is not going to incentivize private sector to grow generation in the state of Maryland. And in fact, the only thing it really did do is it gave a $100 rebate per Maryland citizen to frankly say, here, we're sorry that the rates are going up, here's some money for you. Does not solve this problem whatsoever. And because we're on the committee of jurisdiction that talks about this, remember that the Public Service Commission approves all the rates from these regulated utilities. So the Public Service Commission is the one that can say yes or no. And the fact is, they're saying yes because guess what? These regulated utilities have to bring the energy in from Pennsylvania or further. And by the way, that's expensive. Piedmont Reliability Project, which was transmission, is basically a war out in Frederick County. But why are they trying to run transmission? Because we're not generating it locally. So don't be surprised in future years if we don't solve problems like getting Indian River back up and get some generation on the Eastern Shore, that we're going to be bringing more transmission lines. That's eminent domain. That's definitely issues of taking of property so they can run this. That is a bad place for the state of Maryland, and we didn't fix it. If you think that we left the session this year fixing energy policy, let me tell you, we're no better off now than we were when we started. It's not through wind and it's not through solar. And last thing I'll say about solar is that we will risk losing agriculture if we continue down this policy of thinking solar is going to do it. Purdue, Mount Air, Amic, you name it. At the end of the day, they need inputs. And if we're losing thousands of acres of prime agricultural land, what do you think is going to end up happening? I mean, what's going to end up happening? That should be a fear of all of us in the room today as we talk about all of our industries that are based on the prime industry of our state, which is agriculture and poultry.
Thank you. So I just want to make it a quick announcement. I know that this is slated to wrap up around 1 o'clock, but I feel like we're having great engagement. So I'm going to push it about 10 minutes long. And so as a courtesy, if you're able to stay with us for another 10 minutes or so, I think we're really having a great conversation amongst the delegation. I want to stay on the energy topic, but I want to shift it in a slightly different direction. So you mentioned generation, and you mentioned having access to all the tools in your tool belt, Delegate Adams, and one of those tools is most definitely nuclear energy. And so, Senator Carrozza, you work on the Senate EEE committee, which is Education, Energy, and Environment. And you've had conversations on that committee on the development of offshore wind and its impacts on Maryland positively and negatively. Why was nuclear energy not included to count towards Maryland's clean energy goals, and has that been part of a discussion?
So I'm going to take a step back because we've been talking about energy. We are in an energy crisis, and we started to address it this session, and it's going to dominate next session. Right before I came to this forum, I spoke to my chairman, Senator Feldman. And, you have to think about what got us here, unseasonably cold winter. We've got the climate change mandates. We've got the premature retirement of coal and oil facilities, and we've got the growing reliance on out-of-state energy. All of this, and then we got the spiked ratepayer rates that we are dealing with. So there, a little bit of good news and a little silver lining is you did see a shift in our Senate leadership of actually looking at nuclear and natural gas. And if you look at the bill that passed, Senate Bill 937, I agree with Delegate Adams that it did not go far enough, but it is significant that this leadership is actually, and when you think about the resistance in the past of the overall Maryland General Assembly to be even open to expanding nuclear capability, which is absolutely essential for us moving forward. And I expect as far as the issue of nuclear energy being part of the renewable portfolio, you will see that discussion continue next session. You will also see next session, we will look at other ways to attack the and provide ratepayer relief. So I believe that there was significance in the fact that you had our leadership in the Maryland General Assembly recognizing that we have to look at nuclear and we have to look at natural gas, and realizing that renewable sources like offshore wind energy and the solar energy are not going to take us to meeting our goals. So that's significant, and we're going to keep working on that next session. That will be a priority.
Thank you. So I would like to cover one more thing before I open it up, to just talk about some of the things that we were able to accomplish in Annapolis, because we've talked a lot about the challenges and some of the roadblocks that we've seen. So the last question I want to talk about in regards to those challenges and some of those roadblocks is the Maryland Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. So that trust fund is financially unsustainable as it currently exists, and employers have already been burdened with increases in costs after COVID that resulted in the tables being adjusted unfavorably to cover that additional cost. So reductions in force at the federal level will only worsen the health of this trust fund. The General Assembly this past session didn't do a whole lot to talk about the insolvency, or didn't do a whole lot to address the insolvency of that trust fund. What do we have to do? Next year, that's not going away. So what do we have to look at to help overcome this issue?
So I'm no longer on the Economic Matters Committee. I was until I was the bad delegate and spoke up. So they put me on Judiciary. But for the time that I was on there and talked about unemployment insurance, I understood that the infrastructure or the structure of it is not sustainable, just as you just mentioned. And we saw the effect of that in during COVID, where employers were having to put out more money because it wasn't balancing it. So there was legislation put in several times by Delegate Charkodian from Montgomery County, but to look at both what's being put in and also the benefits of it for the persons who are in need of it. So structurally, it needs attention because right now it's at its highest level that it is. It's like $1 billion. But if we're already in a situation, and we know we are when we're looking at the federal government already firing people for just being government employees, and we have at the state level created a special fund, if you will, to help in that effort. But it still goes back to the fact that they're going to still need that support, the unemployment insurance. And when we were going through COVID, our offices were flooded with phone calls and emails. We didn't have a clue as to what to do. And the issue also became is that our staff, they don't get to see the system. They don't know anything that system looks like. But people thought they did, but we were trying to make that connection for them. And the same unfortunate thing can happen at any given time. So to answer the question, it has to be addressed. We can't pretend that it's not a problem. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
I would like to add to that because Delegate Sherry Sample Hughes is absolutely right. Our offices, we were flooded with constituents who needed our assistance on how to navigate a very complicated, burdensome, difficult system. So in addition to talking about how it needs to be funded, we need to make sure, and we will keep the pressure on, working with the Maryland Department of Labor to make sure that portal and navigating that system is easier for our constituents, our employers. So again, we will keep the pressure on. That is something that absolutely has to be improved, and our challenges will be increasing given our budget situation at every level.
And Delegate Adams, with your work on economic matters, I know this was a top priority. So.
Yeah, just real quick, we didn't pass legislation to resolve it, but remember, UI is a federal program administered by the states, and one of the problems that we have with unemployment insurance is that we're still dealing with the COVID world we were in, and so our trust fund is still in this rubber band fashion trying to resolve itself out. What we don't want to do is ask the private sector to fix past efforts to stabilize the UI trust fund. What we can do, and what the legislature doesn't want to do, is we need to stop using unemployment insurance as long-term financial welfare. That's not what unemployment insurance is. It's a bridge between job A and job B, and so when you expand the use of unemployment insurance, guess who pays? The employer pays. What else can we do? We can ask the Department of Labor correctly to start encouraging and frankly enforcing work search requirements. What's happening right now are people going on Indeed, they're throwing their resumes on, and it is qualifying as searching for work. What's happening is that you're expanding the use of unemployment insurance beyond its intention. It's mandated by the federal government, by the way, and it's wrong. It's wrong. So one of the things that could have happened this year is we could have eliminated Schedule A, which would have been the lowest tier, lowest expense that an employer who doesn't have a lot of turnover would pay, and instead try to make it more expensive, just basically more expensive, by eliminating those employers that do the very best to keep people employed. That is not the solution that we're after, and ultimately the state of Maryland will probably pass a bill that'll resolve this by making it a further mandate on private sector, and that has to be resisted through these Chamber of Commerces.
Thank you. And Delegate, did you want to add in as well?
I would love to.
Yep.
My question would be, how many people have worked and never collected? Think about that. I wouldn't know where to go collect. I've been an employer for over 40 years. And, you know, to me, how many people work just to collect? You have to you kind of have to police this a little bit. I got a phone call while I was up in Annapolis from a gentleman that used to work for me years ago. And he has an LLC, he's never had an employee, and he's had claims filed against him during COVID, and they're following up now, and he's never had an employee. And he's actually been, and he has gone countless times. He actually had me intervene for him, and but you have to look at it and really question, you know, just like what Delegate Adams, you know, just said. You know, people that are using it, you know, to bridge from one job to the other is the purpose of it, and that's what we want it to be for. It's not to work just long enough so that you can collect. There has to be something where we can police and really look at the abusers of the system.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate everyone's input on a lot of these questions. So we had the daunting task of trying to get through a dozen questions that were constructed by our Legislative Affairs Committee, and then we also wove 2 audience questions in there. And you all did a great job. I appreciate you being respectful of our time, and I want to give everybody the opportunity to make some closing remarks. And so while we've beaten the drum loudly on all the negativity and all the challenges, the work that you all do is important, and there's a lot of great work that comes out of that legislative session. We appreciate the time that you take away from your families and your businesses and your jobs to be there, and I'd like to give each of you the opportunity to just make some closing remarks. And so we'll start with you, Senator.
Thank you. Well, you had that last question about 3 highlights from the past year, so I took that seriously, and I wanted to point to those. One is I wanted just to highlight local control and flexibility, my advocacy for the school systems and for our counties, because this blueprint education plan is with us for the future, and there's a way that we can do that, but we can pause and we can hit these implementation and spending problems head on. Number 2, supporting what I would say balanced and fair approach to legislation, and I wanted to share one of my fun bills this session was the my bat conservation bill, and this actually protects 4 endangered bat species, at the same time allows the Maryland forest industry to work on our forests, and that's a $3.3 billion industry for the state of Maryland and a very important one for the shore. And then the last one I wanted to highlight didn't require legislation, but it's something that will benefit our area, and that's that you can now purchase a base tag, and that includes that funding goes to both the Chesapeake Bay and the coastal bays. And I think this is something, again, that it shows that we have coastal bays representing the shore and not just focus on the Chesapeake Bay as a state. So I wanted to leave with a little bit of good news here.
Thank you, Senator. And Delegate Beecham.
You know, it's an honor to sit in this seat, and I don't take it lightly. And I really, my goal was to not stand up on the floor at all this year, just to listen, just to be respectful and just listen. And I pretty much stuck to that right up until the point about the solar panels, you know, on 5% of the, you know, farmland. And, you know, our number one industry, people said, oh, it's military, it's, you know, it's this, it's that, it's farming. You know, there are really four things, and Senator Croza laid that one out for me one time, and I've never forgotten it. You know, the 4 F's, that's farming, fishing, forestry, and fun. And that's pretty much what the Eastern Shore is, if you think about it. And to me, if we don't protect that, and we don't protect our way of life, then it's our own fault. And that's why that was, you know, the one bill that I had to stand up on and just couldn't sit any longer. And I do appreciate getting to serve you. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate.
So thank you very much, Chamber of Commerce, Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce, for the opportunity to serve you in Annapolis as a business owner. Let me 2 comments on the energy bill. Generation is so very important. I want to just reinforce, we did not produce any incentives for nuclear development. The RPS is not good enough. What we did do is impose expensive construction and labor mandates on nuclear, which is going to make it difficult for companies to actually do the work that we were hoping under the bill as introduced, not as amended. The other point I'd make to you is on natural gas. The reason why we aren't going to get natural gas generation conversions is because they've hoisted expensive future fuel mandates like hydrogen and biofuels and forcing them to incorporate that into construction practice, which basically is a net, they're not going to do it. They're not going to be able to do it. So when I say that the legislature didn't do anything, they passed a bill. But I could have voted for the bill as introduced, not as amended. The other thing I would say to you, I mentioned Salisbury University and UMES when we talked about Wallops Island. Warwick Community College is certainly a big part of that. And when I was losing my microphone, I lost my train of thought and who's important, so I'm sorry about that. In closing, I love this job. It's 11 years in. You know, the work that we do is so very important because we do win so many of these issues on its merits in committee. I applaud Delegate Cherie Sample Hughes for her leadership on the House floor because I think she articulated in a way that is different what we on the Eastern Shore often talk about, which is politics is not always Republican, Democrat. It quite often is urban versus rural. And I think we align on so many different issues politically when we get to the subjects that matter to the people and the representation that you're expecting from us. And I saw that in Cherie this year, and it was very welcoming, and thank you for your leadership in that regard.
So I just concluded my third year in the House of Delegates, and it was a trying year. There wasn't a lot of good that we could come out and come back to our wrap-up sessions and to report on. So let me report back on some good things that happened, and that were the bad bills that didn't go through. So we didn't tax sugary drinks. We didn't tax mattresses. We still allow law enforcement officers to pull over cars for littering or that have an expired license plate. People who are setting up tents on public spaces that can't be removed, that bill did not go forward. We didn't license and regulate homeless shelters, which would have shut down many shelters here on the Eastern Shore. We didn't lower the estate tax from $5 million down to $2 million. We didn't eliminate the inheritance tax, which had a negative effect on the register of wills. So the good thing is, while we do pass a lot of bills, we also kill a lot of bad bills while we're there, and we fight for those to make sure some of these silly legislation ideas that happen in early January don't go much further. And it comes because our constituents come up to Annapolis to advocate and fight against it. And you are listened to when you come to Annapolis, and I can't overemphasize the need for you to come and advocate for that. And I'll close by saying the best and funnest bill that we did this year is that the Orange Crush is now the official cocktail of the great state of Maryland.
Good leadership. There we go. We got our priorities straight. Well, it's a challenge to name the positive things we did, but working with the administration and agencies, we are able to intervene for a lot of our constituencies and solve some of their problems. Usually, they've exhausted other remedies before they get to us, but that is one of the more valuable parts of this position. In serving on environment and transportation, we deal with a lot of things, and transportation particularly being the traffic laws and all that. So be very careful throughout the state. They've expanded speed and photo enforcement and stop sign enforcement, stop light enforcement, and they want them on every corner. And that's not that easy to comply with, and I'm against photo enforcement for anything other than passing a school bus with the flashing lights. So with that, thank you for the opportunity, and the business community did come together this year and fought a lot of things and watered it down. We do have a new packaging law, recycling, much like the paint tax that passed too, so be looking for that.
Thank you, Delegate Otto. And Delegate Sample Hughes, you're going to bring us home.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance here today and your support. I do appreciate it, whether it's the phone calls, text messages, or even plants that I received in my office. So I want to first say thank you to that. So the operating budget, just to highlight, there's some things on there that we could talk about more, but I just wanted to highlight that the Wycomico Nursing Home, that was one particular that I wanted to make sure they had their roof replacement. While I put the legislative bond bill in, they didn't fund it because, again, I'm a bad delegate. But anyway, we were able to get $75,000. So these are the things that are important to the community. We have to take care of our community. The Wycomico County Library, $2.9 million for the replacement to go over to Shoemaker. Those are a couple of things just specifically to District 37A I wanted to highlight. I want to also acknowledge that I am so grateful for our disabilities community. They were originally in the governor's budget of about $118 million cut. They came out in droves, whether or not it was raining, snowing, sleet, whatever. They were there on the governor's mansions, in our committees, and they were advocating for a restoration of their funds. They were able to get their funds back. And so if you need some advocacy skills, go to the disability community, because they know what you're doing. And on that same line, I want to just share with you that one bill, Senate Bill 618, which I think is apparent, it is important, is the non-apparent disabilities. If you don't have an apparent disability, it now will be on your license or your permit to show that you have one so you can interface differently with the law enforcement. And then I'm going to do my public service announcement. I have a town hall meeting next Wednesday, Wycomico County. It will be in Hebron at St. Luke United Methodist Church, 6 p.m. The guest that I have there is Department of Natural Resources and the Maryland Department of Labor. And then, of course, you get to hear from me again. Okay, so I hope you're able to attend. Thank you so much.
And Delegate Sample Hughes, I don't think we're ever going to call you a bad delegate. We're going to call you a brave delegate. You're a brave delegate here, and we're proud to have you. One other shout out, and Senator Carrozza, you alluded to this, but you know our brand new delegate. I don't want to overlook some of the work that you did as well, Barry.
So I wanted to first of all say how proud I am to serve with my colleagues on the Eastern Shore delegation. We really do play to our strengths on different committees and different relationships. But I also think it's important. We do have a new delegate, Barry Beecham, and he was very modest. He worked very hard on a House appropriation to secure funding for the Mason-Dixon Athletic Complex in Del Mar, and at a time when it was very difficult for any of the House delegates to secure any funding. So we were able together on the House and Senate side to bring $200,000 back for that Mason-Dixon Athletic Complex, which is really important for our community. So congratulations.
Great job, and thank you once again to everybody who stuck it out. Anybody who's ever given me a hot microphone knows that 15 minutes over is not that bad. So appreciate you for being here. Big thank you to our sponsors. If we could just give one more round of applause to the Tri-County Council for the Lower Eastern Shore. And thank you to our Eastern Shore delegation. Everybody is dismissed except for our delegation members and our sponsors. We're going to take some photos. Okay. Have a great afternoon, everybody.